June 19, 2020, Austria. Early in the evening, a taxi races from Vienna to the Wrocław airfield. Normally, the journey takes just 35 minutes, but the taxi driver doesn't know the way and misses the entrance to the airport. The airport is tiny: a tower, a few hangars, and a restaurant. Since noon, a small aircraft has been waiting here, ready for takeoff. A Cessna Citation Mustang Model 510, but the passenger is late. Finally, at 7:45 p.m., the taxi arrives. A well-dressed man steps out of the car. He pays 7,920 euros in cash for the flight. The plane takes off at 8 p.m. The mysterious traveler is a man with multiple identities, a huge collection of fake passports, and close contacts with foreign intelligence agencies. He is involved in questionable deals, loves playing spies and secret agents, and enjoys a luxurious lifestyle. He is also a key figure in Europe's biggest economic scandal. And from that evening at Wrocław airfield, he is on the run.
Marsalek.
Marsalek.
He's missing.
Was accused of fraud.
Vanished without a trace.
Marsalek is wanted by German authorities and is believed to have fled to Russia.
So there's a massive fraud, and Jan Marsalek was involved in that.
What do we know of Marsalek's whereabouts?
Wirecard was founded in 1999. For a long time, the company was considered Germany's answer to Silicon Valley, a technology corporation specializing in online payments. At first, it mainly processed payments for adult websites and gambling businesses, but its clients quickly became much more serious. Over the next few years, Wirecard experienced an incredible rise. In 2018, the company became larger than Deutsche Bank. Dan McCrum was the first person to discover inconsistencies in Wirecard's financial figures. Together with his team, he helped launch an investigation into the company's alleged fraud. On June 18th, auditors from EY confirmed that Wirecard was missing 1.9 billion euros. The money was supposedly being held in accounts in Asia. The very next day, June 19th, Markus Braun stepped down as CEO. Several days later, on June 22nd, Wirecard admitted that it was highly likely that the missing 1.9 billion euros no longer existed. On June 25th, the company filed for bankruptcy. And that is how the story of Wirecard ended, suddenly and disgracefully. Markus Braun is arrested. He is charged with providing false information, market manipulation, breach of trust, and commercial fraud involving a total of $1 billion. But the prosecutors issue an arrest warrant for more than just him. The second alleged main culprit is Austrian national Jan Marsalek, a member of Wirecard's management board who was largely responsible for the company's business in Asia. The massive trial surrounding the case has been underway since December 2022. Alongside former CEO Markus Braun, former chief accountant Stefan von Erfa, and key witness Oliver Bellenhaus are also involved in the proceedings. All of the men are presumed innocent until proven guilty. However, the trial is taking place without Marsalek, because for almost 4 years there has been no trace of him. Marsalek was fired on the very same day that EY revealed Wirecard's accounting problems. Braun asked him to travel to the Philippines. His task was to find out what had happened to the missing 1.9 billion euros. On June 23, 2020, he landed at Manila International Airport in the Philippines. The following day, he supposedly traveled 800 kilometers to the city of Cebu, and from there continued on to China. At least, that is what Philippine immigration records claim. But something is clearly wrong. There is no footage of Jan Marsalek entering the country on airport surveillance cameras. There are also no flights matching the supposed date of his departure. Apparently, immigration officials falsified the records. They were later charged. But the question remains, where was Marsalek really? On the evening of June 18th, the day he was fired, Marsalek went to the Munich restaurant Il Sogno. There, he met with 2 trusted contacts from Austria. The first was Martin Weiss, a former Austrian intelligence officer. The second was Thomas Schellenberger, a member of parliament from the right-wing populist party FPO. Marsalek told both men that he urgently needed to travel to the Philippines to deal with the problems surrounding Wirecard's balance sheet. He wanted to fly through Minsk, Belarus. Marsalek gave them his passport so they could book the ticket for him. The next day, at 11:56 a.m., an email arrived at Minsk airport. The sender was an employee of the Minsk travel agency Planeta Gryaz. The email concerned the VIP arrival of a special guest from Vienna. Attached to the email was a diplomatic passport from the Caribbean nation of Grenada. On June 19, 2020, at 8 p.m., a small Cessna carrying Jan Marsalek took off and headed toward Belarus. 3 hours later, the aircraft landed in Minsk. Marsalek presented his real passport at passport control. A black Mercedes minibus with Belarusian license plates was already waiting for him. He was taken to the Hampton Hotel on Tolstoy Street in Minsk. Belarusian authorities have no idea whether Marsalek ever left the country or where he might be. By the time prosecutors began searching for him, Jan Marsalek was already several days ahead of them. They searched one of his villas in Munich. What they found there raised even more questions. Before his disappearance, Marsalek spent much of his time at 61 Prinzregentenstrasse. It was a luxurious villa and something resembling a private club for Marsalek, his business partners, and close friends. The property had a high-end surveillance system and a specially designed room protected against electronic surveillance. Nobody actually lived there. Part of the building was used as an office, including by Martin Weiss, the former Austrian intelligence officer who helped Marsalek escape. But the house was also used for meetings between former military personnel, intelligence agents, and money launderers. They sat among Italian designer furniture and expensive oil paintings, discussing business. Sometimes they also visited upscale restaurants. For business, they went to Fine Coast Café. For private occasions, they visited Matsuhisa Munich. Investigators found numerous expensive paintings and sculptures in the villa. On Marsalek's desk, there was even a small statue of Vladimir Putin. They also found a black military uniform. Marsalek apparently used this uniform in Palmyra, Syria, in 2017, shortly after the area had been liberated from ISIS by Syrian forces. Russia supported the Syrian forces during the liberation. Marsalek apparently wanted to experience something almost nobody else could, to simply visit an active war zone. And you have to agree, none of this really sounds like the lifestyle of a chief operating officer at a German company. A huge number of questions arise. What kind of story was hiding behind this villa? Why were so many questionable individuals meeting there? Investigators realized that finding Marsalek would be much more difficult than they had initially thought. They were dealing with a man who was prepared to disappear at any moment. It is said that Marsalek had connections to various intelligence agencies. He liked surrounding himself with current and former agents and spies. He himself apparently acted as something of an amateur intelligence informant. In leaked private chats, he bragged about his contacts with the American CIA and the Israeli Mossad. Some leaked text messages suggest that he worked as an informant for a right-wing populist political party. There are also reports that Marsalek worked as an informant for the Austrian intelligence service under Martin Weiss. According to the Financial Times, he also wanted to recruit his own mercenary unit in Libya. Marsalek loved using aliases during his work at Wirecard. At the end of his time at the company, he said goodbye to everyone over a video call. He logged into the system under the name John Smith. During his escape, he sent numerous messages to trusted contacts, referring to himself as Richard Dobrowski and Karim Ghazmi. But Marsalek had many more identities. The BKA, Europol, and Interpol are searching for him using these two photographs. Jan Marsalek apparently had a passport for each of his fake identities. It is believed that he left Belarus under the name Max Mauer when he fled the country. Marsalek had traveled extensively since 2010, judging by his passports. He visited Singapore and Dubai several times, where Wirecard had a branch. He also traveled to Budapest, Paris, Vienna, London, Mumbai, Nice, and Moscow. Since 2010, Marsalek had reportedly visited Russia more than 60 times. In September 2020, shortly after his spectacular escape from Germany, Marsalek began posing as an Orthodox Russian priest. German and Austrian media obtained a copy of his new passport. Konstantin Boyazov. As an investigation revealed, a priest named Konstantin Boyazov really does exist. He lives in Lipetsk and looks remarkably similar to Marsalek. However, their dates of birth do not match. Marsalek allegedly pretended to be Boyazov so that he could travel without unnecessary problems. In 2022, another document was leaked. It was yet another fake passport, this time issued in the name of German Bajanov, and it provided another clue to Marsalek's whereabouts, as well as yet another identity, Moscow. Jan Marsalek goes to La Marais, an elite Moscow restaurant where Vladimir Putin is known to dine. The restaurant is especially famous for its fish, oysters, lobsters, and caviar, all freshly caught. After dinner, they return to the guarded cottage settlement of Sadie Meyendorf. It is located in one of Russia's most expensive residential areas. This is where Marsalek supposedly lives, just as he did in Munich, in a stylish villa. Besides ultra-wealthy residents, the area is also home to a Kremlin guest house. Putin has an estate nearby. Everything looks as if someone simply changed cities and identities while keeping the same lifestyle. And yes, this may be Jan Marsalek's new life. Maybe. Most of the information about Marsalek's new life comes from Russian sources. Every now and then, photographs appear supposedly showing him in his car or inside luxury restaurants. Much of this information cannot be independently verified. However, German prosecutors and authorities around the world are now convinced that Marsalek really is hiding in Moscow and has been living there for around 3 years. In 2021, Germany's Federal Intelligence Service even received an offer from Moscow to negotiate. The German government has still not provided any information about the case. In 2023, a report by the Wall Street Journal claimed that authorities around the world increasingly believed Jan Marsalek was a Russian spy. According to an investigation by Bellingcat, he began traveling to Moscow more and more frequently starting in 2014. He is believed to have passed information about Wirecard's clients to Moscow. Among those clients were Germany's Federal Intelligence Service and the Federal Criminal Police Office. It is believed that almost 1/3 of the credit card payments used by undercover BKA agents were processed through Wirecard. These transactions could potentially be used to indirectly identify the agents and track their locations. Marsalek is also alleged to have supported the Russian paramilitary Wagner Group. He allegedly transferred money illegally for Russian spies in order to finance secret operations, including for a group of Bulgarians who were allegedly spying for Russia. After Dan McCrum first reported financial irregularities in Singapore in 2019, he became the target of intimidation attempts. He and other journalists were followed and their mobile phones were monitored. McCrum suspects that the Bulgarians later arrested in Britain may have been involved. In 2022, Marsalek apparently personally arranged the smuggling of highly classified equipment from Vienna to Moscow. This included mobile phones belonging to former high-ranking Austrian politicians and a highly classified SINA laptop. The acronym stands for Secure Internet Architecture. It is a cryptographic technology developed jointly by German intelligence agencies and organizations around the world for handling highly classified information. In one of his messages, Marsalek confirms that the laptop safely reached the FSB. He also writes that a Russian specialist paid 20,000 euros for it in cash. In reality, Jan Marsalek may have been a much better spy than anyone initially thought, far more professional and experienced. Media reports from March 2024 claim that his former girlfriend Natalia Zlobina recruited him back in 2014. Experts following the case believe that the former Russian model introduced Marsalek to Russian businessmen and intelligence handlers working with undercover agents. And apparently, in exchange for all of this espionage activity, Russia was supposed to help Jan Marsalek disappear. In Germany, Jan Marsalek faces up to 14 years in prison for financial crimes. And that does not even include the alleged leaking of state secrets. But before prosecutors can put him behind bars, they first have to catch him. According to the Wall Street Journal, Jan Marsalek may currently be in Dubai. Reporters believe that after the death of Yevgeny Prigozhin, Marsalek may be helping rebuild the Wagner Group in Africa. The hunt for one of the world's most wanted men continues.